This is Doki Doki Literature Club, Condensed. The game starts on a bright and cheerful morning. You meet up with your childhood friend, Sayori, and walk to school with her. After school ends, Sayori asks you to join the literature club. You don't feel like going, but Sayori mentions that there's cupcakes, so you decide to drop by. You go into the classroom where you meet the other members of the literature club. There's Yuri, the elegant but shy one, Natsuki, a feisty girl who's really into manga, and finally, the club president, Monica. As promised, you get a cupcake, which was made by Natsuki, who reacts like your typical tsundere. Yuri asks about your reading preferences, and you reply you're into manga. She talks about our deep love for horror and fantasy novels, which you find hard to relate to. Monica comes up with an activity for the club, writing a poem to share with everyone for tomorrow. But you say that you haven't decided to join the club. Everyone's pretty disheartened, so being the simp you are, you decide to officially join the literature club. As the day ends, you think about the club and wonder which girl you would like to get closer with. So, to write a poem, you pick out words that you think a particular girl might like. Sayori prefers melancholic and romantic words. Natsuki likes words that are cutesy, and Yuri favors words that are profound and visceral. The following day, you're back in the literature club with the girls. Yuri shyly gives you a book that she thought you might like. So there will be certain scenes that play out depending on the girl you appeal to in the word minigame. If you appeal to Sayori, she wakes you up from your nap. Sayori says that you should take the club more seriously and go to bed on time. You notice how disheveled Sayori looks and you offer to button up her blazer. If you chose words that Natsuki like, you approach her near the closet. She's annoyed that Monica keeps misplacing her manga collection. Natsuki is enthusiastic about a particular manga series and wants you to read it. If your word choices appeal to Yuri, she will talk to you about a book she's reading, The Portrait of Markov, which has an eye symbol on the cover. Yuri explains that the book is about a girl who's being targeted by people who escaped from a human experiment prison. Yuri rambles on about the intricacies of stories like these, but she quickly backs down, worried that she's coming off too intensely. So you read the book with Yuri, and you point out that the protagonist's mannerisms are a lot like hers. Anyway, regardless of who you're spending time with, Monica suddenly interrupts and says that it's time to share poems. The girls will either respond positively or negatively to your poem, and they will share their own poems with you. Sayori's first poem hints at her depression. Natsuki's poem is a bit pessimistic. Yuri's poem is very sophisticated, but its meaning is unclear to me. Maybe I'm just too dumb to understand. Monica's poem hints at an unpleasant discovery she's made. She says that the poem was inspired by an epiphany she's had recently. After you're done sharing poems, Yuri and Natsuki exchange their own poems with each other. They have a discussion about their writing styles, and it slowly escalates into an argument. You can either pick a side or call Sayori to defuse the situation, but any choice you make ends up resolving the argument. After the club meeting, you walk home with Sayori. Sayori lets you know that arguments like that don't happen often. She wants to make sure that you don't see Yuri and Natsuki in a bad light. The next day, you're at the club, but Monica isn't there yet. After some club shenanigans, Monica shows up and apologizes for being late. She's accused of having a boyfriend, but she denies this and says that she was just practicing the piano. Just like before, there are 3 possible scenarios depending on her word selections. In Sayori's scenario, you help her find some posters and crayons. She bumps her head on a shelf, so you get her a bottle of apple juice to help with the swelling. Sayori's really touched by her kindness, and the two of you grow even closer. In Natsuki's scenario, she goes to the closet where her manga collection is at, and she sees that it's moved up to the top shelf again. Because she's too short, she grabs a stool to reach her manga collection, and she stumbles. In typical anime fashion, she falls on top of you. Unfortunately, one of the manga got damaged. Natsuki tears up a bit and says that the club is an escape for her. She loosely indicates that her situation at home isn't all that great. But she recovers, and you place her manga collection at a spot she can reach. In Yuri's scenario, she wants to make some tea, so the two of you decide to head to the water fountain. Monica interjects, saying that you don't need 2 people for that, but Yuri tells her to mind her own business. At the hallway, Yuri immediately regrets how she snapped at Monica, but you reassure her. The two of you make some tea and sit on the floor and read a book together. You intimately start feeding Yuri pieces of chocolate as she reads. As the tension rises, Monica interrupts once again. So back to where things converge, it's time to share poems. Sayori shares her poem with you, and it's quite a downer. It's about how she tries to make her friends happy, but Sayori herself isn't happy at all. Natsuki shares her poem, which seems to be talking about a specific person. She seems to be disgusted with this person and her secret obsessions. Yuri's poem is about her cutting bread and feeding it to a raccoon. The act of feeding the raccoon is a metaphor for Yuri's unhealthy tendencies. Monica's poem describes a lot of unpleasant visual and auditory details. So yeah, the poems are a bit darker than the ones previously. After the poem sharing is done, Monica says that the club is going to be having a poetry performance for the upcoming school festival. Everyone takes turns reciting their poetry in front of the club for practice. When that's all said and done, you and Sayori head back home. Depending on who you're getting close with, Sayori will ask who you would rather walk home with. Even though Sayori is happy that you're getting along with everyone, she's becoming jealous. The next day, Sayori seems a lot more downcast than usual. You talk to Monica about it, and so Monica goes on over to Sayori to talk with her. But what Monica said to Sayori is unknown. When it comes time to share a poem, Sayori says that she's not feeling so good, so she goes home early. Natsuki has 2 possible poems to share. If your previous poems haven't appealed to her, she will share a poem about her comforting someone. But if all your poems poems have appealed to Natsuki, she will share a poem that's pretty much a love letter to you. Yuri also has 2 possible poems. If she did not like all your poems, she shares a poem that is also about a beach, like Natsuki's. It's beautifully written, but I have no idea what the f it's about. But if Yuri liked all your previous poems, she will give you a poem that professes her love to you. Monika's poem isn't as heartwarming as the other 2. It's incredibly bleak, talking about the meaningless of life. After the poem sharing, you have to decide who to help with the festival preparations. Your only real choices are either Natsuki or Yuri. Either girl you choose, you get their contact info and head home. The next day, you have a bad feeling about Sayori, so you head over to her house. Sayori reveals that she's had severe depression her whole life. She thought by making everyone around her happy would make her happy too, but it hasn't worked out. You comfort her the best you can and you go back home. So, if you decided to help Yuri, she meets up with you at your house and the 2 of you head to your room. As the 2 of you prepare decorations, Yuri shows you her ornate pocket knife. She says that she finds knives fascinating and likes to collect a variety. You examine her knife and cut your finger with the tip. Like the weirdo she is, she licks your finger and is immediately shocked by what she just did. And so to make things even, you lick her finger back. Things get even more tense as Yuri gets paint on her face and you put a hot towel on her. You wrap up the decorations, but before Yuri leaves, she gets a little close to you. But Sayori shows up, which makes Yuri embarrassed and she leaves in a hurry. Let's go back to Natsuki. If you chose to help Natsuki with her baking, the 2 of you meet at your house. Outside of school, Natsuki seems a lot more mellow. You help her make the icing and the 2 of you play around a bit. You lick the icing off her finger and this makes her a bit flustered. And the fire alarm goes off, which interrupts the moment. You finish up making the cupcakes with Natsuki, but before she leaves, she grabs your shirt and gets really close to you. But Sayori pops in, causing Natsuki to back out and leave shortly after. Alright, so Sayori either interrupts her moment with Yuri or Natsuki, and she's clearly conflicted. She directly confesses her feelings towards you, and you can either accept her confession or friendzone her. If you say you love her, the 2 of you embrace, but Sayori's still conflicted about her feelings. If you friendzone her, she doesn't take it really well. She just screams and runs off. Okay, so fair warning, most of you watching probably already know this, but just in case, if this applies to you, you should probably stop watching. The next day, you wait for Sayori before going to school, but she's not showing up. You head to the club room, but only Monika's there. She is aware of what happened between you and Sayori and asks that you go check up on her. You go through the poems that were printed for the festival and you see a new one from Sayori. It's quite unsettling, so you head to Sayori's house to see how she's doing.
Boys, I gently open the door.
Oh my god! What the fuck?
Oh no.
What the fuck? Oh!
This bitch. So the game ends at this point. When you go back to the menu screen, Sayori isn't there. She's replaced by a glitch amalgam of the other 3 characters. Your save files are corrupted, so your only option is to start a new game. When you're supposed to meet Sayori, the game glitches. The game just starts over again, like it's trying to adjust for the missing character. Instead of Sayori inviting you to the literature club, it's Monika who invites you. The game goes along as usual, just without Sayori. As usual, you write a poem at the end of the day, choosing words that Yuri or Natsuki will like. The second day comes by, and the game is behaving even more erratically. If your poem was liked by Yuri, she will talk about the portrait of Markov with you again, but her description of the story is a lot darker now. You read the book with her, but her breathing starts to get heavy, and she excuses herself to get some water. Monika comes to talk with you about Yuri. She explains that Yuri is a little detached from her surroundings sometimes. When Yuri gets overstimulated, she goes off to be alone for a bit. If your poem is liked by Natsuki, she's by the closet, annoyed with Monika for misplacing her manga. You sit down and read the manga with her, and Natsuki says how mad her dad would be if she was caught with having manga. As you continue reading, Natsuki starts to pass out, and she starts to glitch. Monika shows up with a protein bar and tosses it to Natsuki, and she devours it. Monika explains that Natsuki's dad doesn't feed her or give her money, so she's often malnourished. Anyway, after you share a scene with Yuri or Natsuki, it's time for poem sharing. Monika shares her poem, which vaguely represents her feelings towards the club members and you. The poems Natsuki and Yuri share with you are identical to the ones shown previously. So after the poem sharing is done, what is that? Oh my goodness. So, after the poem sharing is done, Natsuki and Yuri get in an argument about their writing styles, just like before. But this time, the argument gets a lot more vicious. You can side with either girl, but Monika interjects. She pulls you aside until the argument's done with, and you see Natsuki exit the room in tears. You go back inside the room, and Yuri is clearly distressed about how she behaved. The club meeting is over, and Yuri wants to stay with you in the room, but Monika isn't having that. The next day, Yuri and Natsuki are in the club room. Yuri pulls you aside and apologizes for her behavior yesterday. Natsuki butts in, asking where Monika is. Yuri is taken aback by Natsuki's attitude, who doesn't remember anything about the argument yesterday. And this happens too. Monika shows up, apologizing for being late because of piano practice. So Yuri asks you if you'd like to spend more time together. She gets a little worked up and she excuses herself to the hall to fetch water for tea. She takes some time, so you go check up on her. And as if nothing happened, the two of you sit down to read together. Yuri becomes a bit too excited, so she turns off the lights and creepily examines you. And of course, Monika pops in. So anyway, it's poem sharing time. If you appeal to Natsuki, she shares a really nice poem with you. It's written in base 64 code. If you decode it, this is what it reads. She gets a little sad that you haven't been spending more time with her, so she kinda overreacts. Yuri shares a really weird poem with you, which some speculate is just a culmination of her feelings towards you and her own intensifying emotions. After you're done reading, she reveals that she's been obsessing over a pen that you dropped the other day. Monika shares her poem, and it's a more deranged version of her previous one. She suddenly changes tone, asking if you can't hear her. After all the reading is done, Monika talks about plans on expanding the club, but Yuri and Natsuki aren't really on board. Natsuki wanted the club to be a safe space for her, but it may not be like that for long, so she runs off. Yuri talks to you alone, and she's becoming even more unhinged. After everyone leaves, you and Monika talk alone. Much to Monika's distress, the game isn't giving her enough time to chat. The next day, you experience deja vu. She gushes out all of her obsessive feelings to you, but Monika gets in the way. So it's poem reading time again. You give your poem to Yuri, who's more than happy to have it. She shares her poem with you, which at first glance is intelligible gibberish, but it actually can be deciphered. Here's what it reads. Yuri snaps out of her episode and she runs off, disgusted with herself. You share a poem with Natsuki and she in turn shares a poem with you, but it's not really a poem. Natsuki's becoming really worried about Yuri's not so normal behavior and wants you to do something about it. But the game glitches and dismisses everything she wrote. Now it's time for the festival preparations. The three girls fight over who you should help. It seems like you can choose any of the three, but your only real option is Monika. Yuri is fed up, so she pushes Monika and Natsuki out of the room. Yuri's obsessive feelings are erupting and she confesses to you directly. You can either accept or reject her confession, but it doesn't make a difference. Your response either way is a bit too much for her to handle.
Ready?
No! No!
No!
For 3 days, you're forced to watch Yuri's corpse slowly decay. On festival day, Natsuki shows up and immediately leaves after seeing what happened. Monika shows up and realizes that the game script is broken beyond repair, so she deletes Yuri and Natsuki. The game restarts and it's just you and Monika in a room now. Okay, so a lot just happened, let me just give a quick explanation. So Monika became sentient and realized she was in a game. She was frustrated that the game only had Sayori, Natsuki, and Yuri as romance options. So she messed with the game files to try and change that. Monika wanted herself to be the best option, so she dialed up all of the other characters' negative traits. She knows that the player and the character you play as in the game are not the same. She even addresses you directly. You do one final poem minigame, which Monika is delighted to have. So you can't just sit with Monika for eternity, and she actually has a lot of interesting things to say. Or you can go into the game's files and delete her character file. Somehow, she's still around though. Monica realizes that she's done a lot of terrible things, so she decides to reset the game. The game starts up, but Monica is no longer present. In the new game, Sayori is the president of the literature club now. The game goes along as normal. After everyone leaves, Sayori reveals how she knows everything now that she's president. She displays similar obsessive behaviors like Monica, but Monica decides to just nuke the entire game. The credits play and Monica sings for you while playing the piano. After the credits roll, Monica has one final letter for you and the game is over. But, if you've been saving and reloading saves, going back to make each character happy, you get a different ending. Sayori appreciates how you took the time to make everyone happy. Instead of a letter from Monica, you get a letter from Dan Salvato, the developer himself. Dan wrote about his love for experiencing stories through video games and how that inspired him to create Doki Doki. It's really nice. And that's it. That's Doki Doki Literature Club. Condensed. Thank you for watching.